Since you've seen us, we would like to see some action from you now. We will be launching the first poll and would appreciate your response on the following question. Did you attend any of the Erasmus Plus information sessions this autumn/winter?
Okay, so the results are in, and it looks like the majority of you did not attend any of the Erasmus Plus information sessions, so we are hoping that you will find this webinar useful.
Thank you very much, Ava. So now, just to give you an overview of what we will be covering today, I'll start by giving you a quick introduction to Key Action 2 and what funding is available. The main focus of the session will be the application form. We'll first talk you through what you need to do beforehand, then we will go through the application form together, filling out certain parts, showing you how to use the distance calculator and how to validate the form. Then we will round up the key points. And then finally, we'll mention the next steps and how to contact us for support in the run-up to the deadline. As you hopefully know, in this session, we will be focusing on Key Action 2, Cooperation for Innovation and the Exchange of Good Practices. Key Action 2 is all about cooperation and collaboration. It offers opportunities for organisations from different countries and different sectors to work together to share good practice and innovation and to improve the provision for learners. The UK National Agency, which is a partnership between the British Council and Ecoris UK, is responsible for managing strategic partnership projects, the decentralised action under Key Action 2. Strategic partnerships in the field of adult education are managed by the team at Ecoris UK. Other types of projects under Key Action 2, such as knowledge and sector skills alliances, are managed centrally by the Executive Agency of the European Commission. We won't be talking about these types of projects during the webinar today, but you can find more information in Part B of the programme guide from page 121 onwards. Strategic partnerships are cooperation projects which allow organisations to work together to improve the quality of education and training provision, tackle common issues, and share or develop innovative practice. As you're aware, one organisation applies for funding on behalf of the whole partnership, and if the project's approved, this partner has overall responsibility for managing the funding and is accountable to the national agency for the project. Strategic partnerships are flexible in terms of what they can entail and in size. This means that there is flexibility in terms of what activities you implement, as long as your application could demonstrate that these activities are the most appropriate to achieve the objectives defined for the project. Projects can be one of the following two types. Firstly, strategic partnerships developing innovation. These projects are expected to develop innovative outputs and/or undertake extensive dissemination and exploitation activities. Strategic partnerships supporting innovation can request specific funding for intellectual outputs and multiplier events in order to support the delivery of their objectives. Secondly, strategic partnerships supporting exchange of good practices. The main objective of these projects is to allow organisations to develop and reinforce networks, increase their capacity to operate at a transnational level, and exchange ideas, practices and methods. Depending on their objectives, projects may also develop tangible outputs and are still expected to disseminate the results of their activities in a way that is proportionate to the aims and scope of the project. These results and activities will be co-financed through the standard project management and implementation budget, and no separate funding will be able to develop intellectual outputs or multiplier events. The type of strategic partnership to be developed will need to be selected within the application form. It's therefore important to give careful consideration before applying to the type of partnership that's best suited to your objectives and the experience and capacity of your partnership. Also, when preparing your project and choosing your partners, it's important to carefully consider the experience and capacity of the participating organisations. Whilst large-scale projects are supported, it's also possible to deliver smaller-scale cooperation projects. The grant will vary depending on the size and scale of the project, and I'll talk more about this when we look at the budget section of the application form. There are opportunities to develop strategic partnerships focusing in one field of education and training, or to develop cross-sector projects. You can find out more information about this on our website, but in this webinar, we'll focus specifically on strategic partnerships for adult education. Projects focusing on adult education can deliver a wide range of activities around topics such as developing, testing, adapting and implementing innovative approaches in learning and teaching methodologies for adult learners, for example, focusing on delivering key competencies, basic skills and language skills. They can also promote recognition and certification of skills and competencies by referencing them to European and national qualification frameworks and using EU instruments. Moreover, they can improve the accessibility of learning opportunities for adults by, for example, development of training courses available for adult education teachers, managers, or other adult education staff, or by promoting the development of multi-purpose learning centres and regional networks of learning providers. And finally, they can focus on providing flexible pathways for adult learners, including validation of their prior learning by practical application and testing of methods for validating knowledge and competencies acquired through informal and non-formal learning. Where relevant, when devising your project activities, you may want to consult the website of the Electronic Platform for Adult Learning in Europe. IPALE is a multilingual, open membership online community for teachers, trainers, researchers, policymakers, and anyone else with a professional role in adult learning across Europe. It's set up around the sharing of content related to adult learning, including news, blog posts, resources, events, and courses. The examples provided on this slide are just some ideas and not an exhaustive list. You can also refer to the examples provided in the programme guide on pages 111 and 279 for inspiration, and you should always ensure your project idea fits with the action priorities listed on pages 107 to 110. It's important to link your Key Action 2 project to the overarching European priorities and show the added value of carrying out your project on a European level. When doing so, it's important to keep the general objectives of the Erasmus Plus programme in mind. More information about this can be found in Part A of the Erasmus Plus programme guide, as well as to remember the following important features. Firstly, recognition and validation of skills and qualifications, for example, by using Europass in the field of adult education. Secondly, dissemination and exploitation of project results, for example, the use of the Erasmus Plus logo, as well as the Erasmus Plus project results platform, which is a contractual requirement for Key Action 2 projects. You should also remember about the open access requirements for educational materials, documents, and media produced through Erasmus Plus. Another important feature is international dimension, i.e. cooperation with organisations from different countries. Moreover, there is multilingualism by requesting funding for linguistic support for long-term teaching, training and learning activities if applicable. Also, please bear in mind equity and inclusion, for example, by facilitating the access to learners with disadvantaged backgrounds and fewer opportunities compared to their peers. And final feature is protection and safety of participants by making sure all participants are safe and supported during their project activities. In addition to these features, in order to be funded, a strategic partnership must address either at least one horizontal priority for strategic partnerships, an overview of which can be found on pages 107 to 108 in the programme guide, or at least one specific priority relevant to the field of adult education, an overview of which can be found in page 109 of the programme guide. Where a project addresses a horizontal priority, it's still important to show how the project will impact on the field of adult education. In 2016, projects addressing the horizontal priority of inclusive education, training and youth will be considered highly relevant. However, in all cases, projects will need to clearly demonstrate how the project objectives and planned activities will address the selected action, priority or priorities. So what is a Key Action 2 strategic partnership? One organisation applies to their country's national agency on behalf of the entire partnership. Projects can be of different sizes, but you will need a minimum total of 3 partners from 3 different programme countries, including the applicant. You can find the definition of a programme country on the handout. The lead or applicant organisation must always be a programme country, although partner countries can participate as partners, but only if their participation brings clear added value to the project. Projects can last from 12 up to 36 months. You need to choose the duration of the project at the application stage, and this cannot be changed. However, the latest possible end date is the 31st of August 2019. Projects can be different sizes, and the funding will reflect this, as you'll build up your project budget from a series of unit costs per activity up to a maximum total budget. The maximum budget is a variable amount defined by multiplying €12,500 per month for the duration of the project, with a maximum of €450,000 for a 36-month project. There is no formal requirement for match funding in the project budget, although the principle of co-financing applies, and if you're interested in that, please see page 242 of the programme guide for more information. Once you've decided what it is you want to do, you have set up a partnership and thought about how to address different European priorities, you will need to complete the following 2 registration steps. You will need to register on ECAS first. ECAS is the European Commission Authentication Service, and you will need to register here to use any type of external European Commission tool. We have a video guide on our website which will talk you through how to do this, and you can find the link to it on your handout. If you already have login details for ECAS, you can use these. You'll then need to obtain a Participant Identification Code, or PIC, to access the participant portal. The participant portal is a single entry point for the electronic administration of EU-funded projects related to Erasmus+. You will be prompted to provide information about your organisation, as well as upload documents related to your organisation. These documents are needed to prove the legal status and financial capacity of your organisation, and it's essential that the information on these documents matches the information on the portal. If your organisation already has a PIC, you should use that one and not create a new one. Please make sure all the info is still up to date. If your organisation does not have a PIC, and please do double check, you'll need to obtain one. Please bear in mind that if you're applying for a new PIC, it's important to make sure that you register onto the correct participant portal, as there are different ones. The link provided in the handout is for the Education, Audiovisual, Culture, Citizenship and Volunteering portal. However, if you just do a search on the internet, you might come out on the Research participant portal. You can find further information about the application process in Part C of the programme guide. Please download the partner mandate templates from our website and have them filled in by your respective partners and signed by both parties. Make sure that information such as the name of the organisation, address and legal representative on the partner mandate is identical to the information on the application form. Otherwise, the partner mandate will not be accepted. After brainstorming your project idea and following the registration process, you can move on to the application form. The application form is an eForm and will need to be submitted online by the applicant organisation by the deadline of the 31st of March 2016. Please keep in mind that this is 11 AM UK time, as the deadline for applications is generally 12 PM Brussels time. You will need to use your, as well as your partner's PICs to fill out the application form. It's therefore important that the PIC information is correct for all partners, as it will be used throughout the lifetime of your project, and it's your responsibility to keep the information up to date. To make sure that you have the correct application form in front of you, you should double check that it states Call 2016, Round 1, for the 31st of March 2016 deadline. Applications to the UK-NA should be completed in English. We will now go into the actual application form and run through it with you. As we go along, we'll also show you how to fill in some of the sections, as well as give you hints and tips based on feedback from previous rounds. We will be using a test application form, as using an eForm from one of the previous rounds would contravene data protection rules. So if you give us a second, I'm just going to switch to the application form itself. Okay, I hope everyone can see this now. The application form, which is an eForm, is available to download from the Apply for Adult Education Partnership Funding page of the Erasmus Plus website. You should save it as a PDF to your computer. Please check that you've downloaded the correct application form for the first round of 2016. As mentioned on the slide, you can do this by checking the following. So this is section B, context. Key action, cooperation for innovation and the exchange of good practices. Field is strategic partnerships for adult education. Call is 2016 and round is round 1. As I go through the application form, I will use the scroll bar to scroll up and down the page to the relevant sections of the form. I will concentrate on hints and tips for each section of the form as we go through the sections, rather than describing all of the information needed, and I'll concentrate on the sections dealing with project activities and budget, showing how these link to each other, as well as giving you hints and tips on how to complete them. An important feature of the Key Action 2 application forms for 2016 is that you need to choose what the main objective of your project is, and based on that choice, certain sections in the application form will appear or disappear. The two options are development of innovation and exchange of practices. We will start off by showing you what the eForm looks like for development of innovation, and then show you the differences with exchange of practices. You'll also need to select the language you're using to complete the application form from the drop-down menu. For applications made to the UK/NA, this should always be English. You'll need to input your start date and choose the duration of the project, which will automatically fill in the end date for you. The start date must be between the 1st of September and the 31st of December 2016. However, please note the latest end date for your project is the 31st of August 2019. I'm going to scroll to section C, priorities. Here you will have to select the most relevant horizontal or sectoral priority for your project. As you can see, your main priority should be a horizontal or adult education priority if you're applying in the field of adult education. If you choose a horizontal one, you'll need to explain how it links to the adult education field specifically. If your application addresses the horizontal priority, inclusive education, training and youth, it will be considered as highly relevant. However, you'll still need to make sure it's in line with the objectives of your project and explain your choice clearly in the box below. You can select 2 more priorities, and here you can also select other fields in case your application has a cross-sectoral approach. Okay, I'm going to scroll down to section D. Section D.1 is for your organisation as the applicant. Sections D.2 onwards are for any partner organisations that will be included in the project. Remember, when you put in your PIC and your partner's PIC numbers, the information will automatically populate from the information on the participant portal. There we go. Check the details, and if you notice any details are incorrect for you or your partner, they will need to be corrected in the portal. You should also check that the information in the partner mandates matches the information in this section for you and your partner's organisation details. If any of the information in the mandate doesn't match the application form, you'll need to go back to your partner to amend the mandate. Please note that all participating organisations need to be identified in the application form, and you won't be able to add partners at a later stage. It's also important to remember that a better quality application will be specific and name staff members who will be delivering the project and their skills. Please explain how your organisation's previous experience of delivering projects or activities has built the skills and knowledge needed for the activities that you propose in this section. Moreover, include details of the people your organisation typically works with in terms of geographic location and any additional needs they might have, if you feel that that information is relevant. Also, please explain how the activities proposed in this application fit into other programmes or activities that you deliver. This will help the assessors understand how the proposal is innovative or complementary to other initiatives that your organisation is already involved in. And finally, make sure it's clear from the description of each partner's work and expertise why they have been chosen to participate in your project. This applies to all partners, including smaller organisations which may be involved. Each page of the application has a validate button, so you can check information as you go. So the validate button's here. This will identify if any mandatory sections have been missed so far and any errors in the way the information has been input. As you can see, we need to select what type of organisation our applicant is. You can see that the form directs us to the next error or box where there's information missing. In this case, the email address is not in the correct format. Okay. So now I'm going to scroll to section E. So this section D.3 is another partner. The information there for them. And this is section E. So I'm going to give you some hints and tips here. As well as a description of the project, your application will be of higher quality if you explain the rationale behind the project and if you can demonstrate that your project is based on a genuine needs analysis that you or one of your stakeholders or partners has done. Including details of this can also show why you have included certain partners, which would help the assessors understand the choice, which is, after all, one of the criteria that they're assessing. Make sure you demonstrate that each transnational face-to-face partner meeting is necessary for achieving the results of the project. Make sure that the number of partner meetings is appropriate, as assessors consider that hosting more than one partner meeting each could be excessive unless it's well justified. Show that the planned participants are appropriate to the project activities, as this will support your request for budget under the Transnational Project Meetings heading. Make sure that your results fit with the objectives of the project and that they are realistic and achievable. You should provide details of which partners will be involved in producing each result and when they'll become available. Make sure you know what is meant by results. Please go to page 301 of the programme guide for the Commission's definition. If you're unsure about what a strategic partnership project can be, have a look at page 285 of the programme guide, which gives examples of strategic partnerships. For adult education, page 286 gives a good example. Section E.1 participants here. We'd like you to double check the definition of participants with fewer opportunities on your handout to make sure that you're aware of what that covers if you say yes. Now I'm going to scroll to section F, which is preparation. Here you should mention any preparatory activities that will take place before the start of your project activities, including practical arrangements and also including anything you've done so far putting in your application. But please remember that funding cannot cover any costs made before the start date of your project. Okay, section F.1 here, project management. In this section, you'll need to give as much detail as you can. For example, when describing your project activities, mention how you will coordinate activities within the partnership and how you will identify and resolve any risks within your project. The best quality projects will use innovative, qualitative and quantitative indicators of achievement in order to assess whether and to what extent the project has achieved its objectives and results, which help to demonstrate the impact of your project. If you have these, please give details in this section. List the indicators and attach numerical targets to quantitative indicators wherever possible, and who is going to analyse those. Examples of indicators include measures of skill levels attained to establish the impact of new methods on participants and the measures of the quality of the results produced. Methods to measure achievement may include surveys, web analytics and interviews. Okay, we've now reached section G, implementation. Before we start this, I'm just going to have a quick drink. Thank you. Okay, so section G, implementation. So the thing you should know about this is the numbering of the sections from the implementation section onwards will change depending on the sections that you select to complete. You should ensure that the activities selected are relevant to the type of project that you plan to deliver and to its objectives, and make sure that all relevant sections are completed. We'll cover this section in more detail as it relates to the activities that will feed into the budget. It's very important to keep in mind that data here will need to correspond to the data in the budget section. Otherwise, you'll not be able to validate your eForm. As we've selected Development of Innovation in Section B, Section G.1 Intellectual Outputs will appear here. Intellectual outputs are substantial and high-quality, tangible outcomes. Each intellectual output will result, not a process to reach a result. It can be a product, such as a curricula, pedagogical work materials, open educational resources, IT tools, analyses, studies, or peer learning methods. Dissemination plans or project evaluation reports are not considered as intellectual outputs. So, for instance, a general project website is not considered an intellectual output, and costs related to a website will be covered under the Project Management and Implementation budget heading. Under Development of Innovation projects, we would normally expect you to develop intellectual outputs. Therefore, you would need to select Yes from the drop-down menu to generate the relevant parts of the application form that you need to complete. And I'm doing that now, so yes. And you can see it comes up here. Under development, you must ensure that any intellectual outputs listed meet the eligibility criteria and clearly explain the resources that you will need to produce the planned intellectual output, as this will be essential to justify your budget request. If you're not planning to develop any intellectual outputs as part of your project, you should consider whether it would be more appropriate to select exchange of practices as the main objective of your project under Section B context. So I'm now going to show you how to complete this section to make sure the budget section of the application form completes correctly. You'll need to include a title, a description of the intellectual output, as well as describe the prep work and methodology for the intellectual output. We recommend that you include details here of the type of staff and days required to complete these outcomes to prevent potential overlap with manager and administrative staff costs, which normally should be covered under project management and implementation. In addition, if you need to use any subcontractors or to purchase specialist equipment to produce the intellectual output, you will need to make it clear in this section. To demonstrate that intellectual outputs are substantial, it may be helpful to explain how you have calculated the resources needed for each intellectual output. You'll also need to indicate when you will start and end working on the intellectual output, as well as show which languages the intellectual output will be available in, what type of media it is, and which organisations will be working on it.
Okay, I'll talk you through the information Phoebe is inputting into the form at the moment. So the fields for output title, description, and tasks and a methodology are mandatory, so we're just writing test in here for the purposes of this demonstration. Phoebe is selecting the start and end date, and it is important to mention here that we recommend you use the calendar function to select the dates, or remember to input the date in the correct format, that is day, -month, -year. Otherwise, the form will not validate. So Phoebe has chosen the languages the intellectual output will be produced in, and she's also choosing the format of the output. She's now choosing the organization which will lead the production of the intellectual output and any other organizations in the partnership that will work on it as well. Thank you, Eva.
Thank you, Eva. If you make a mistake, you're able to remove the last option in the list, and you can add as many intellectual outputs as you need. So click Add Output.
Okay, to show you how to complete the budget section later in the eForm, Phoebe is just adding a second intellectual output. You'll see throughout the form that there are plus and minus buttons which will allow you to add an extra line or remove the last line from an option, the way Phoebe did to remove the second language from the first intellectual output. There are also add and remove buttons if it's possible to add a whole extra activity under a particular budget heading, like Phoebe did to add a second intellectual output. So once again, Phoebe is choosing the start and end dates of the intellectual output, the languages the output will be available in, the format, and also the activity leading organization and any other participating organizations.
Okay, so now that we've completed the intellectual output section, I'm going to go on to multiplier events. So I'm going to scroll down here. Multiplier events are only applicable if you plan to deliver intellectual outputs, and they must be national or transnational events aimed specifically at disseminating intellectual outputs. So if there are no intellectual outputs, there can be no multiplier events, and this section won't appear in the application form. Examples of multiplier events are national or transnational conferences, seminars, and events. Training courses, webinars, piloting sessions, and meetings are not considered as multiplier events. A very important point here is that multiplier events cannot take place before an intellectual output has been at least partially developed. The main goal of the multiplier events is the dissemination of and general support for the intellectual outputs. They can be used to disseminate other project results as well, but this should never be their main purpose. Multiplier events must take place in the countries of the organisations participating in the project. They can also take place at a seat of the institution of the EU, even if none of the participating organisations is from Belgium, Germany, Luxembourg, France, or the Netherlands. Only participants from organisations other than the beneficiary organisations can be counted in the number of individuals for the purposes of determining the grant amount. These participants can be local, i.e. from the country where the event is taking place, or international, i.e. from other countries. If you're planning to include multiplier events, choose Yes from the drop-down menu to generate the multiplier events part of the application.
Okay, I'll talk you through the information that Phoebe is inputting for the multiplier event. Like with intellectual outputs, you will need to include a title and description for any multiplier events, so Phoebe is just inputting test for the demonstration. She will also need to select the country the event is taking place in and which intellectual outputs will be disseminated. So we've chosen the United Kingdom for the country the event will take place, as the lead is the UK organisation. For the dates, please remember that the multiplier event should take place after an intellectual output is finished or almost finished. As Phoebe mentioned, all multiplier events must be linked to intellectual outputs, so we've selected first intellectual output. You also need to select which organizations are participating in the event. So Phoebe has selected one organization as the lead and the other two as the participating organizations.
Okay, now that's completed, you're able to add as many multiplier events as you need, but the funding is limited to a maximum of €30,000 per project.
Okay, so Phoebe is just adding a second multiplier event now, so we can easily show you how the budget is completed. So Phoebe again is inputting the event title and event description, as well as the country of venue. And with this event, we've selected the other organization to be the lead. And since this organization is based in Finland, we've chosen Finland for the country. So we again choosing start and end dates for the event. Please remember to use the calendar option here. And we need to select which intellectual output this event will cover. So just to highlight again that plus and minus buttons will allow you to add and remove rows from each item under each multiplier event you add.
Okay. Right, now that we've had a look at the multiplier events, I'm going to scroll down again. And this is section G.3, which is learning, teaching and training activities. So learning, teaching and training activities can be included if they're clearly linked to the project objectives. For example, you might include piloting of your intellectual outputs with the appropriate target group if this involves a mobility aspect. The programme guide lists eligible activities and duration on pages 111, 114 and 280 onwards. If you include learning, teaching and training activities, you should clearly explain how they support the achievement of your project objectives and whether you plan to use any EU tools such as Europass or any national instruments to validate the learning outcomes of the participants. We would strongly encourage you to consider using Europass, which in turn will strengthen your application in respect to the quality of the tools for validating participants' learning outcomes. So hints and tips for the implementation section. One area which some previous applicants struggled to describe well is non-formal and informal learning. Hopefully you all know what the terms informal and non-formal learning mean, but the Commission has given definitions in the glossary on pages 305 to 312, which can be found at the end of the programme guide. If you're planning to include learning, teaching and training activities, choose Yes from the drop-down menu to generate and complete this part of the application. So I'm just going to select Yes. You'll need to choose the appropriate field and activity type and provide a detailed description. If your project is only focused on adult education, then we would expect to see activities only in this field. The other fields are available as options if you're planning a cross-field project with a focus on adult education. It's important to explain how the activity is adding value to the project and linked to its objectives.
Okay, so I'll take you through the information for the learning, teaching and training activity as Phoebe is inputting it now. So we've chosen adult education as the field and blended mobility of adult learners as the activity type. As a reminder, the program guide contains information about different types of activities that are possible for each field. When you input the number of participants, this is the total number for this activity, which includes participants with special needs and any accompanying persons. You'll need to input the duration in either days or months, which depends on the activity type you selected. So since Phoebe chose an activity that can only have a short duration, the box for months is grayed out and can't be typed in. To demonstrate how this changes, Phoebe is changing now the activity to one which will allow long-term durations. Now the duration in day is grayed out and can't be typed in, and the duration in days will come up automatically depending on the amount of months you will put in. Okay, so now Phoebe's chosen participating organizations. Okay,
excellent. Thank you, Eva. Like with intellectual outputs and multiplier events, you're able to add as many learning, teaching and training activities that you need with the Add Activity button, which is here. Please be aware that learning, teaching and training activities should include participants from beneficiary organisations from at least 2 different countries. Okay, let's scroll to section H here. This is some hints and tips here. Please remember that impact is a very important element in Erasmus Plus projects, and you must therefore show the importance of your proposal on your target groups and beyond, as well as on a local, regional, national and European level. Also, please be aware that at the assessment stage, in case 2 projects score the same, we will be looking to compare the individual scores under the impact and dissemination quality criterion. Think about any added value of realising this project on a European level and put this here. Plan for dissemination activities to take part throughout your project lifetime, not just at the end. We suggest that you have a look at Annex 2 of the programme guide, which provides practical guidance on dissemination of your project. Demonstrate that dissemination will reach and engage all of your partners, stakeholders and wider network. And finally, make sure it's clear that your plans for sharing results of your project do not contain disproportionate limitations to free access from the public. If you do intend to introduce any limitations, you'll need to explain and justify this here. Okay, now we're going on to the next complicated section. So scroll down to section I, budget here. You'll find more detailed guidance on how to complete the budget section in our application guidance and part B of the programme guide. Getting the budget right is a quality criterion. Projects with a correct and duly justified budget are more likely to score highly than those that do not. The maximum total grant available for any strategic partnership in the field of adult education is €450,000, which comes down to €12,500 multiplied by a maximum duration of 36 months. However, the amount you request depends on your activities. It's important to note that the budget under all cost headings is built up under a unit cost basis per participant, except for exceptional costs and special needs support, which are budgeted for and reimbursed on the basis of actual costs. Unit costs are a set amount per participant, which is a contribution towards the cost. For some unit costs you will spend more, and for some perhaps less than the unit cost. Unit costs are used to help the funding simpler to understand and to manage. For actual or real costs, as the name suggests, you will receive funding for a proportion of the actual costs incurred. Real costs are always used for the budget headings exceptional costs and special needs support. However, you cannot always claim the full amount. For travel from the outermost and overseas territories for participants in teaching, training and learning activities, you can claim up to 80% of eligible costs. For exceptional costs, this is only up to 75% of the eligible costs. One exception to this are special needs support costs, where you can claim up to 100% of the eligible costs. All projects will have at least project management implementation and transnational partner meeting budgets. So section I.1 is project management and implementation, which is based on a unit cost. This component of the grant is a contribution to general project management and smaller scale project implementation activities, such as project management, like planning, managing finances, coordination, communication between the partners. Also, these can be smaller scale learning, teaching and training materials, tools and approaches. You can also cover here virtual cooperation and local project activities, for example, classroom project work with learners, adult work activities, organisation and mentoring of embedded learning or training activities, and finally such activities such as smaller scale information promotion and dissemination activities, for example, brochures, leaflets and websites. The amount payable is based on the duration of the strategic partnership and the number of partners involved. €500 per month is payable as a contribution to the activities of the coordinating organisation, and €250 per month for each participating organisation, up to a maximum total of €2,750 per month. You will note that in the case of projects involving more than 10 participating organisations, this component of the grant will be limited to the equivalent payable for 10 participating organisations. That's 1 coordinator and 9 partners. Otherwise, this would be over the maximum. As you can see, this section of the budget is automatically completed based on the number of organisations that were included in section D at the beginning of the application form. Okay, section I.2 you can see here is transnational project meetings, which is based on a unit cost. This component of the grant is a contribution to travel and subsistence costs for meetings hosted by the participating organisations. You will need to click the plus button to create a line for each partner. Costs are based on 3 distance bands. You will need to use the distance calculator to fill this out. A link to this is provided in the guidance to applicants. The distance is from cities and towns, so choose the nearest one to your head office and the head office of your partners. The band that comes up is the band which you will need to input into the application form. This will then automatically populate with the unit cost. This cost is a contribution towards the return journey costs. Please ensure that you put in the right band, as this will be checked at assessment, and if it's incorrect, it could affect the quality of the application.
Okay, so Phoebe is now inputting the information about the partner meetings that each organisation will attend. You should bear in mind that if you say you're having 5 partner meetings hosted by each partner, then you would complete this section with 4 partner meetings each rather than 5, as each partner will host 1 meeting and attend 4 meetings. This sounds obvious, but again, this is a common mistake and could affect the quality of the application. So in this example, there are a total of 3 meetings planned, with each partner hosting 1 each.
Okay. So now I'm going to switch to the distance calculator in order to show you how to do that and to work out the distance band. So let me just go through here.
Here we
go. This is the distance calculator. So scroll down. Right.
Okay, so the distance calculator works by you inputting the town or city that will be the point of departure and arrival for the partner meeting. Our test organizations are based in Birmingham, Helsinki and Barcelona. As you can see, as Phoebe starts to type the name of the location, the distance calculator suggests locations. Clicking the calculate button will provide the distance in kilometers, and it is this number which dictates which distance band you will need to select. As you can see, the distance from Birmingham to Helsinki and from Birmingham to Barcelona will fall into the same distance band. So Phoebe will now switch back to the application form to input this information. So in this case, the UK organisation will attend 2 meetings within the same distance band, so both of those meetings can be included in one row. Phoebe will now go back to the distance calculator to check the distance between the Finnish and the Spanish organisation. Okay, as you can see now, the distance between Helsinki and Barcelona will qualify for a different distance band. So going back to the application form, Phoebe will be inputting each meeting for those 2 organizations into separate rows.
Okay. After putting in the information about the organisations, numbers of meetings and participants, and the distance band, the amounts per participant and in total will automatically generate, as you can see here. Scrolling down to section I.3, which is intellectual outputs, which is also based on a unit cost. The funding can only be used for staff costs for the organisations directly involved in the production of the intellectual outputs, and this must be clearly justified in the body of the application. Important to mention here is that the staff costs for managers and administrative staff are expected to be covered already under project management and implementation, unless the development of the intellectual output is identified as a distinctive separate role for the managers and administrative staff in question, but this should be very clearly justified. If not, these costs will be cut.
Okay, so Phoebe will now add the budget information for the 2 intellectual outputs that we created earlier in the application form. As Phoebe said, the information you add in the budget should be clearly reflected in the earlier section. Phoebe has added 5 rows using the plus button. You should use a new row for any change in the organization, intellectual output, staff category, or number of days to ensure the budget completes correctly. So Phoebe is now inputting the rest of the information for each organization. And as you can see, she included a small number of manager days for intellectual output 1. As she mentioned earlier, if you do include any manager or administrative days, please clearly justify these, otherwise they may be cut. And as Phoebe completes each row, you can see that the budget is automatically filled in.
Okay, now that that's filled in, the cost generated by the category of staff and the number of days should be clearly linked to the description of the intellectual outputs in section G above. Okay, now we are on section I.4, multiplier events, which again are based on a unit cost. This budget heading is only applicable to projects planning to organise national and/or transnational events aimed at disseminating intellectual outputs produced by the project. Therefore, a project which does not plan to deliver intellectual outputs cannot be awarded funding under this budget heading. Please be aware that the costs for travel and subsistence of the representatives of the participating organisations are not included in this. Important to note as well is that only participants from organisations other than the beneficiary organisations can be counted in the number of individuals for the purposes of determining the grant amount. These individuals can be local, meaning from the country where the event is taking place, or international, so from other countries. The costs should be clearly linked to the description of the multiplier event in section G above. And as mentioned earlier on, multiplier events should not take place before the intellectual output that they refer to has been developed. The costs are calculated on a unit cost basis up to a maximum of €30,000 per project.
Okay, so Phoebe will now add the budget information for the 2 multiplier events. Once again, it is important to use a different row based on the information that you are entering. For multiplier events, you should use a different row for any change in the organization and the multiplier event. You don't need to use a different row for local and international participants as long as the organization and multiplier event are the same. As you can see, Phoebe is now inputting the information for two organizations, the UK one and the Finnish one. And she used one row for my organization and two rows for Kimo, since Kimo will be including participants in both multiplier events. This is also why Kimo has international participants for multiplier event 1, since this multiplier event will be based in the UK and their participants will be from Finland.
Thank you, Eva. So now we're going to continue on to section I.5, which is funding for the teaching, training and learning activities, which are based on a unit cost. Funding should only be requested under these budget headings where your project intends to deliver transnational training, teaching and learning activities within the strategic partnership. The added value of these mobility activities needs to be addressed in the body of the application form. There are a few subheadings under this section. So the first one you can see here is travel. This is a contribution to the travel costs of participants, including accompanying persons, from their place of origin to the venue of their activity and the return journey. You will also have to use the distance calculator for this, but the form uses different rates where you enter the distance.
Okay, so Phoebe is now inputting the travel information using a row for the participants from each organization. Obviously, when you are completing your application form, you would need to use the distance calculator again to check which distance band to use. Phoebe has made sure that the number of participants including here matches the total number of participants included earlier in the form. This is very important because any inconsistencies would either affect your grant requested or even prevent the form from validating.
Okay, the next section is individual support here. Here, the contribution for participants partaking in any long-term or short-term learning, teaching and training activities will be calculated depending on the duration of the activity. Accompanying persons should be listed separately on the right-hand side.
Okay, since the activity we chose earlier was a long-term duration, Phoebe is completing the long-term section. The form will not allow you to add a short-term activity under the long-term section. If you're trying to complete the long-term section and no learning, teaching and training activities are available for you to choose, you should check the earlier section of the form to make sure you selected the correct activity and input the correct duration in the correct box. Once again, Phoebe has made sure that the number of participants and accompanying person matches the information in the earlier section of the form.
Okay, you can see that the total is calculated there after I filled in the budget table. The next section you can see is linguistic support. This is a contribution to costs associated with language support. Linguistic support can be offered to participants to improve their knowledge of the language of the host country in order to support their active participation. Any costs requested under this budget heading must be clearly justified within the body of the application. The application won't allow you to request linguistic support if you don't have a learning, teaching and training activity that meets the minimum duration. Again, you can see that this is all filling out as I go through. If you need to add linguistic support but the form won't let you, you should check section G where you input all the learning, teaching and training activities details. The next section going down is exceptional costs, referring to outermost regions and overseas countries and territories travel costs. If you plan to organise learning, teaching and training activities and you want to involve participants from outermost regions and overseas countries and territories, then it's possible to request extra funding for travel for these participants. You will have to indicate what organisation the participants are linked to and which activity they'll partake in. Please make sure that you clearly justify why you are requesting these costs. It's important to note that the numbers of participants here need to match the numbers put into the descriptive part in section G. If that's not the case, the form will not validate, so please double check this. Okay, so section I.6 is special needs support, and this is based on real cost. This budget heading is only applicable if you plan to involve participants with special needs in your project, resulting in additional costs. This component of the grant is based on an estimate of the likely actual costs relating specifically to the needs of participants with disabilities. In the budget section, you'll need to identify the activities that the requested costs relate to. The participation of individuals with special needs must also be justified in the main body of the application form. You can claim up to 100% of these real costs. So I'm filling in the form for you. As an example, as a reminder, a person with special needs is defined under Erasmus Plus as a potential participant whose physical, mental or health-related situation is such that his or her participation in the project would not be possible without extra financial support. Okay, section I.7 is exceptional costs, and again this is based on real cost. This budget heading relates exclusively to actual costs related to subcontracting or the purchase of goods or services that cannot be delivered or provided by the organisations participating in the project for duly justified reasons. Any costs requested under this heading must be clearly justified within the application, as I've mentioned earlier. Where such costs are justified, 75% of the eligible costs will be payable, up to a maximum of €50,000 per project. As mentioned before, exceptional costs related to travel of participants from outermost regions and overseas countries and territories will fall under category 1.5.4 above. We have had previous applicants budgeting for visa costs for partners, staff and participants under this category. However, visa costs are not considered exceptional costs under this specific key action. If they are for staff members of the participating organisation, they should be covered under project management and implementation. If they are for participants attending a multiplier event, they should come under that category. If participants in learning, teaching and training activities need a visa, you will need to absorb this in the costs associated with these activities. In respect to the special needs support and exceptional cost description, the application form allows you to write up to 5,000 characters, so please ensure that any requests for these costs are clearly described and justified in the application form. Okay, so we're going to move on to section J, Project Summary. This summary will be used by the European Commission and the national agency in their publications and will also feed into the Erasmus Plus project results platform, so it should be written with this in mind. It should be written in clear, plain English, avoiding any technical or sector-specific jargon to ensure that it can be understood by the general public. So, we have section J.1, which is Summary of Participating Organisations, section J.2, which is the Budget Summary, and section J.2.1, which is the Project Total Grant. Please check that the information in these sections is absolutely correct, so in case it's not, you can make amendments in the earlier section. Make sure that your grant requested does not exceed the maximum allowable grant, which is €12,500 multiplied by the amount of months that you apply for. Okay, so we're going to scroll to section N, which is for annexes. Compulsory annexes are the signed Declaration of Honour, the scanned mandates of each participating organisation to the applicant, signed by both parties, and a completed timetable of activities, also called the Project Timetable Spreadsheet. These documents can be downloaded from the Apply for Adult Education Partnership Funding page of the Erasmus Plus website. Your project application will be ineligible without these attachments. So I'm now going to switch to a completed timetable to show you what that looks like. Okay, here we go. The timetable uses the same letters that appear in the application for intellectual outputs. Is that coming up for you? apparently my screen has stopped, so I'll just wait until... Excellent, I'm being told that you can see the project timetable now. So the timetable uses the same letters that appear in the application for intellectual outputs, multiplier events, and learning, teaching and training activities. Some activities don't have a letter in the application, but these are explained in the box underneath the timetable. It's a good idea to use these letters throughout your application when covering any project management and implementation activities, like Skype meetings, local project activities, dissemination activities, etc. As you can see, we've coloured the cells to show which months each activity takes place in. This should correspond to the information that you include in your application form. So I'm just going to switch back to the application form again. Okay. If there is still some room for attachments once these three are attached, you are able to attach other relevant annexes, such as the needs analysis and a sample work programme, for example. A tip here is to keep it concise. We expect all the information that is key to the quality and content of your project to be included within the main body of the application form. Now, before we continue on to the submission part, we just want to show you what happens if you select exchange of practices as the main objective of your project. And this is going to require me to go back to the top of the application form, so give me a second. Okay, we're back at the top. So you can see the objectives that we chose earlier was development of innovation. I'm just going to select exchange of practices. And now I'm going to scroll down to section G to show you how it changes. So we're going past all the information that we input earlier. Okay, we're back at section G. Up until section G, implementation, the eForm looks exactly the same as how we filled it in earlier. As you can see, the sections for intellectual outputs and multiplier events are now missing. The application jumps straight to learning, teaching and training activities, and the numbering is therefore slightly different. So you can see learning, teaching, training activities. And I'm going to scroll down to the budget. Here we go. Here in the budget section as well, you can see that it goes straight from international project meetings to learning, teaching and training activities, and the sections on intellectual outputs and multiplier events are missing. Okay. Now we're going to section O, which is submission here. Validate as you go and after you completed the application. So if I click validate, you'll be taken to any sections which are incorrect or have been missed, like this one here. This will need to be resolved before you can submit the form. So I'm just going to write test, and then I'll validate it again just to check. So this says that the form is now valid. Okay, now I'm going to scroll back to submission again, but this is section K, the checklist, which you should read. And then also there is the data protection notice, which is very important as well. When you do your submission, you'll need to make sure that you are connected to the internet. So when you've completed, you'll need to save the final completed version of your application form to your PC in case of any submission issues. Please note that the deadline mentioned in the form is Brussels time. The form needs to be submitted online by 11 AM UK time on the 31st of March 2016. We would advise you to leave plenty of time in completing your application and then submitting it online before the deadline in case of any unexpected technical difficulties. So now that we've had a look at that, I am now going to go back to the slides. Just going to make sure that everyone can see that. So now we are on the application requirements section, and we'd like to hear from you. So Eva's going to launch a second poll, and we would appreciate your answer to the following question. So we'd like to know if you are considering submitting an application in 2016. for the 31st of March deadline.
Okay, so it looks like the majority of you is intending to submit a KA2 adult application. So just to remind you, we have a guide for applicants on our website, which will provide you with further information while filling in your application form.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Eva. So we're back on the slide again. Once we've received your application, we will check its eligibility. Your application will not go forward to assessment if your start date and end date, as well as the project duration, are not in line with the criteria specified on the programme guide on page 113, or if your budget requested from Erasmus Plus is more than the maximum, or if you do not have the minimum number of programme country partners, or if you submitted your application after 11 AM on the 31st of March 2016. As part of the assessment process, the NA will also check the requested budget is in line with the funding rules set out in Part B of the programme guide. If these rules are not respected, your requested budget may be reduced on assessment. Please make sure that you carefully read the programme guide and the national agency guidance available on our website for further details on the eligibility requirements before you submit your application. The Erasmus Plus national agencies will be validating your organisation and your partner organisations. However, this is a separate process and not linked to the assessment of your application. Therefore, your organisation being validated does not imply a successful outcome of your application. During the validation process, we will check whether all the information you put into the participant portal is complete and correct. We will check whether the required legal and financial forms have been uploaded, as well as the supporting documents. The verification of financial capacity does not apply to public bodies and international organisations. In cases of EU grant requests submitted by other types of organisations and not exceeding €60,000, you must provide a declaration on their honour certifying that you have the financial capacity to implement the project. This declaration of honour constitutes a specific section of the application form. In cases of EU grant requests submitted by other types of organisations and exceeding €60,000, you must submit your organisation's most recent profit and loss account and balance sheet. For entities which cannot provide the above documents because they are newly created, a financial declaration or an insurance declaration stating the applicant's professional risks may replace the above documents. Please note, organisations that are not validated may not be able to take part in Erasmus Plus funded projects. You or your partners not being able to provide the correct or completed documents can cause significant delays to the contracting process and can even result in the NA withdrawing its offer of funding. Therefore, please ensure you're clear about the requirements and communicate these to your partners as early as possible. Some key points to remember about the budget. The maximum budget is a variable amount defined by multiplying €12,500 per month for the duration of the project with a maximum of €450,000 for a 36-month project. The grant is a contribution to project costs based on either unit costs or real cost budget items. When contribution is based on unit costs, funding will be automatically calculated depending on the unit. For example, this can be the number of participants for a certain duration or a set cost per distance travelled. Budget headings using unit costs are project management and implementation, transnational project meetings, intellectual outputs and multiplier events. Under learning, teaching and training activities, travel, individual support and linguistic support are also contributions based on unit costs. Contributions based on real costs apply to the following budget headings: special needs support and exceptional costs, as well as exceptional costs under learning, teaching and training activities. Special needs support can amount up to 100% of eligible costs. For exceptional costs, this is 75%. For expensive travel costs of participants from outermost regions and overseas countries and territories under learning, teaching and training activities, you can request up to 80% of eligible costs. Your budget should be appropriate to your activity and demonstrate cost-effective use of resources. Several of the budget lines are conditional on you demonstrating added value, and you will need to clearly justify, especially for real costs, why you are requesting a certain amount of funding. Please note, for strategic partnerships supporting exchange of good practice, it's not possible to request a budget for intellectual outputs or multiplier events. The following documents must be annexed to the application form: Declaration of Honour signed by the legal representative mentioned in the application, the mandates of each partner to the applicant signed by both parties and with information identical to the information about the partners in the application form, and also the timetable of activities or the project timetable. We recommend that you scan different documents together into a single file. If, after checking that the annexes are within the size and file format limits, you're still experiencing problems with the annexes, you can email them to erasmusplus@ecoris.com, clearly stating which application form they relate to by providing the application hash code and your organisation's details, as well as the project's name, but please only do that as an exception and ensure that you followed all the available guidance first. You must ensure that you validated all sections of the application form before you submit it. You will need to ensure that you're connected to the internet in order to submit your completed application. You should also ensure that all sections of the form are valid and all annexes are attached before you submit the form. If there are any technical issues preventing the form from being submitted, it will say error under status. If this happens and you're unable to submit the form, you should follow the alternative submission procedure as described in the guide for applicants. In this case, you can still submit your application by sending it via email to us within the 2 hours following the official deadline. However, the UK National Agency will only accept this submission if the error message is recorded under status in the submission summary section of the eForm with a timestamp prior to or on the deadline date and time. The following error messages are not accepted as technical issues. Error 01. This error relates to invalid data or missing details in the eForm. This is not considered to be a technical issue and can be rectified by correcting the application form and validating it again. Error 06. This error means that there are errors with the annexes, meaning that the total size of the attachments exceeds 5 megabytes, or they are not in the accepted file format accepted in section N of the application form. This can be rectified either by reducing the size of the attachments or by removing them. Unknown. This means that the eForm was not submitted and no submission attempts were made. Local 01. In order to submit the eForm, you must click the appropriate options in the yellow security warning bar at the top of the form. Local 02. In order to submit the eForm, you should check your internet connection and try to submit the form again or try a different network connection. Please note that the National Agency is aware of a current issue with the eForm. If your application does not include any teaching, training and learning activities, you may receive the error message Error 01 Submission Validation Error when you try to validate and submit the application. To find out how to rectify this error, please go to page 56 in our Guide for Applicants version 2, which is available on our website. Okay, a couple more hints and tips before we conclude. Before and while you complete your application, refer to the Commission's documents, first of all the Programme Guide and the National Agency's own guidance available from our website. If you've applied before, don't forget to review the feedback you have received from us, as this will include key areas of improvement which will enhance your chances of submitting a good quality application. Please remember that only one application could be submitted by the same partnership under the 31st of March deadline. Please save the form frequently so that no information is lost. Ensure that correct options are selected on the application so that important sections aren't deleted. As I've said before, while looking through the application form, double check that the budget you request is accurate and well justified and that you respect the maximum amounts allowed. Provide relevant answers to the questions in the application, but remember that there's a character limit on many of the sections. You can see the limit by hovering your mouse over the answer boxes. A good idea is to get someone else to proofread your application and annexes, perhaps against the published award criteria. And finally, leave enough time for completing and submitting your application before the deadline of the 31st of March 2016. So, to conclude, I'd like to remind you of the support that the UK National Agency will be offering in the run-up to the 31st of March deadline and for applications to be submitted under Key Action 2 Adult Education. A recording of this webinar will be sent to you in the next couple of days. After this webinar, you will be redirected to a feedback form. Please do fill this out as we aim to continuously improve these webinars and have taken previous feedback on board when creating the webinars for this round. A detailed guide for applicants on how to fill out the application form is available on our website. If you haven't done so already, please do sign up to our newsletter, as this provides all the most up-to-date information about the call and about the Erasmus Plus programme. On our website, you can find other key documents, for example, the timetable for activities, so we recommend that you have a look at those. We also recommend that you have a look at the assessment criteria in the guide for assessors. This will give you an indication of what assessors are looking for in your project application. We also have a helpline where our team is available to answer your questions about your Key Action 2 Adult Education application. Thank you all for your attention and participation. We'll be around for a couple more minutes to answer any final questions, and if there are any more that come up, please contact us via the erasmusplus@ecoris.com email address or the number on this screen. As I've said before, our team is also available every day from Monday to Friday to answer any queries you may have via the erasmusplus@ecoris.com inbox or our helpline. You can see the number on the slide and you can find it in your handout as well. If there are any questions we haven't managed to answer during the session this afternoon, we'll get back to you by email afterwards. Do also please keep an eye on the Erasmus Plus website for news and further guidance. We hope you found the session useful today, and we wish you really good luck with your future applications.